Welcome back to the Friday Night 360 AZ Preview Show. I'm Jordan Ham alongside Haley Stasiak. We are continuing our coverage of the first round of the high school football playoffs, and now we're going to bring in Arizona Varsity's Ralph Amsden. He does great work. Ralph, my friend, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
Doing awesome. Covering a lot of ground.
The first round of playoffs.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. I know Halloween was last night. You have 4 children. How have you survived?
Well, I'm feeling a little bit like Saguaro right now because a lot of my kids' candy has opened and rolled into my stomach. So
what an analogy.
I'm feeling pretty good.
All right, so you're already in playoff form. Good to know. So we'll start off with 6A. When we look at this bracket, there is a ton of talent, obviously, with that premier division and all throughout the entire state. In my mind, I think Chandler is the most complete team, but you have teams like Mountain Point and Desert Ridge who just want to kind of suck the life out of the game and, with that defense and that run game. And then you have teams like Hamilton, Perry, Pinnacle, kind of those teams that can put up points in, just so many points at one time. What do you see when you see kind of this opening round bracket and kind of the 6A as a whole?
Well, one thing that I like to do is I like to go through and see how many playoff teams you've actually seen on any given team's schedule. And one of the things that stands out is, Mountain Point, I think, is the only team in all of 6A that's undefeated against current playoff teams, which actually isn't true. No, because they lost to Desert Ridge. So I think everybody actually has a loss. It's really tough to figure out, and it really depends on kind of how the brackets are put together. You see a potential Hamilton Perry second round matchup. You see a potential Chandler Pinnacle second round matchup, but then you also can't look past the fact that Hamilton has given up a lot of points. And what if they're not able to get any defensive stops in the first round? What if Cesar Chavez with Andrew Blitzky, what if he goes off on offense and defense and does something that Pinnacle's never seen before? Because I think this might actually be one of the first times that these two teams have ever squared off. So there's not really anything to prepare for as far as experience. So, there is the idea that it's just going to be 1 through 4 at the end, and I think that possibility exists at a much greater percentage for every division except for 5A. But I think the potential exists for a couple of upsets. One that I'm actually predicting will happen, which people might not really consider much of an upset, is Desert Mountain taking down Highland, just because Highland's had such trouble scoring the ball. And the one time that I got to see Highland up close, the thing that they really struggled with, is somebody who can kind of hit soft spots in the zone, and that's something that Keaton Slovis can do at Desert Mountain. But other than that, as far as my predictions, I think you're going to see the favorites win outside of Desert Mountain, but really anything could happen. You look at Red Mountain's run to the semifinals last year, and when a team gets hot, they just get hot, and it's hard to predict.
Mm-hmm. And I know that you were really looking at that Desert Mountain and Highland game as well.
That's so funny that you brought that up. I saw Highland play Desert Vista, and they went into that double overtime, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a spark in that game until the fourth quarter. Do you see kind of that carrying into the playoffs with Highland and maybe some of these other teams with like a late push in these games?
I think that Highland has an above-average running game, and I think that they have an above-average running back. What they're going to need to do if they want to beat Desert Mountain is they're going to have to throw the ball, because Desert Mountain's given up more points through the air than I think probably any team that's qualified for the playoffs at any division. So it's really going to come down to the play that they get from Caleb Herbert at quarterback. He threw for 1,067 yards in the regular season. Desert Mountain's had games where they've given up over 400 in one game. And so what they're really going to need is they're going to need maybe Tanner Lunt, who is their leading receiver, to step up and have a big game for them in order to get out of that first-round matchup, because just defensively they've been fantastic, but putting points on the board has really been their issue.
Mm-hmm. Taking a look at 5A now, you kind of alluded to it. It seems like it's so wide open this year, and there are, 8 to 10 teams that could conceivably make a run here. When you're looking at this bracket, do you see any double-digit seeds potentially making some upsets, or who are kind of the hot teams that jump out to you right now?
Well, Marana, for one, the fact that they got all the way up to a 9 seed, I thought that they were probably going to come in as the hottest, most talented double-digit seed maybe in the history of the Arizona, high school playoffs. But they'll be the 9 seed, and they'll have a tough game at Verado. That's going to be that might be the game to be at, to be honest. That's going to be a really, really great game. But I think I think I was actually talking with you at the selection show, where this is the bracket where teams 1 through 14, maybe not so much 15 or 16, but teams 1 through 14, there's a path for every single one of them to get at least to the semifinal. And I mean, how incredible is that to think about? That I think outside of Fairfax, who has a real tough draw in Cienega, and Sunny Slope, whose upset win over Apollo got them going head-to-head with Centennial. I think everybody else, especially, Williamsfield, who's coming on late with a couple of, transfer running backs that are making contributions, Apollo with their disruptive defensive line, Notre Dame Prep with their skill positions. I really think that out of all of those teams, I'd maybe give a lower chance to Mountain View Marana and Campo Verde, but they've played teams tough as well. So I'm looking at 5A right now, and I would not be surprised by any of the teams showing up in the semifinal outside of maybe Fairfax and Sunny Slope.
With Queen Creek's big loss to Williamsfield last Friday, do you think that there will be a shift in the tone for Queen Creek coming into the playoffs?
Yeah, and I think that traditionally Williamsfield has sort of been the big brother to them. And Travis Sherman is really looking at it as an opportunity because, they were on such a roll for such a long time, even though they were eking out some victories over Ironwood Ridge and Campo Verde. You still have it in your head that you're unbeatable when you're sitting there at 9-0. And so, you never like to say moral victory, but it could be a good loss in that you get some kids to finally take seriously some of the stuff that you've been pointing out on film that needs to be fixed, that maybe isn't getting addressed because they're just winning and winning and winning. I think Mountain View Marana is a much better draw. I predicted that they'd end up with Desert Edge in the first round. I think this is a much more winnable game for them, but they have to stay away from that attitude altogether because they're vulnerable, and Mountain View Marana is going to come in looking at them as being vulnerable and having been exposed by what Williamsfield did last week.
Mm-hmm. When we look at 4A, we just had Steve Decker from Sunrise Mountain on, and despite being the top seed, he kind of said this was Saguaro's division, but there are plenty of teams in here who could make a run, specifically in the top 4, and then also Cactus and Seton Catholic, are 2 really nice teams as well. Is it one of those divisions where the semifinal could be the top 4 teams and kind of everybody else?
It will be. It'll be the top 4 teams. I don't expect any surprises. And maybe that'll come back to bite me. We'll see. But I'm treating 4A essentially like the encore performance, the bonus performance bracket. There's some really, really talented athletes that we're going to get to see play high school football for the final time. Ethan Zimmerman at Apache Junction, Andrew Young, Cactus Shadows quarterback, Demarie Nelson at Cactus. I'm more in it for as far as the 4A bracket, for seeing what some of these kids do their final time out on the field. Seton Catholic's a really, really great story. Walden Grove and Pueblo from Southern Arizona are doing some great things too. But I'm looking at the 4A as you're going to see the top 4 seeds in the semifinals. The path to get there for each of them is, I don't want to say it's easy, but it's relatively obvious. And so when I look at 4A, I would be excited to get out and see like a Nate Dobson at Peoria, just kind of give it a last go and leave it all out on the field. Because for me, that's really what it's all about, is You know, some of these kids will go on to play after high school, and some of them won't. But a lot of them have been very, very good high school players, and have done some really, really special things. And so, I mean, just in that 16-1 matchup where Sunrise is probably going to get out to a really early lead, Apache Junction has gotten 3 great years from Ethan Zimmerman, and this is probably going to be his last go-around. I highly recommend, if you're a Sunrise fan, you know, you're listening to this because, you know, the head coach was on, you know, pay attention to him as well because he's been a really, really good player.
You mentioned Seton Catholic kind of being a really good story. What is it about this team that's made them good this season?
Well, Gary Gallant came in 3 years ago, and as Rex Bowser was leaving, and they were fresh off both a championship and then a semifinal appearance. The numbers were down a little bit. They were also a very young team, but he brought in the mentality that I'm going to take all these sophomores, I'm going to bring in the weight training regimen that I had out at Brophy, and you know we're going to put them to work. And by the time they're seniors, even though they're probably playing a division above where they'd like to be, it's going to pay off. And ultimately it did with an 8-2 regular season, with Vincent Wallace at quarterback and you know, Wade at running back and the Hansel brothers on defense. They're physically more mature, I think, than they would have been without his presence there. And I've also had people who were concerned about Brophy, you know, who had won a playoff game 12 years in a row, saying that, like, maybe that's what we're missing is that development and that toughness, you know, from when Gallant went over to Seton Catholic. You're actually seeing them on the rise and Brophy sort of drop, and maybe he was the X factor, and it's just really paying dividends for Seton right now to have him as the coach leading these young men.
3A is another just wide open division, in my opinion. You know, there are a ton of teams, I think, that could make a run. When you look, it seems like ALA might be the most battle-tested and have the best resume. They lost a close game to top-seeded Push Ridge. They've beat the number 4 team, the number 5 team, the number 6 team, and the number 8 team in pretty impressive fashion. So what do you make of this bracket and just the amount of teams in that?
Well, my favorite thing about the 3A bracket is it's teams from all over the state, and so you have, you know, different styles. You have teams traveling exorbitant amounts of time to, you know, to get their games in. American Leadership is a very good team. They've gotten better as the season has gone along. I think they have a 6'6" receiver named Tanner McLaughlin that colleges are seriously missing out on. I had completely missed out on him altogether. I think he moved from Alberta, Canada, and I think he would be an impact player even at the 6A level. Snowflake I've seen in person. You know, they can be relatively inconsistent, but, you know, they beat a really hot Blue Ridge team last week, and they have a chance to take out Yuma Catholic in the first round, but they're going to have to travel a long way to do it. Florence is another team that has a really talented quarterback and some talented defenders, but Blue Ridge has a freshman quarterback, and they're, you know, and they've been doing really, really well for themselves. I think that whole bottom half of the bracket is all just kind of worried about what has become the evil empire that is Castile. You know, that is kind of, you know, they know they're going to jump 2 divisions. This is their last hurrah in 3A to try to win a championship with their all junior team. They've kind of angered some teams by throwing deep in the fourth quarter up 50 and stuff like that. And so you might actually see if Yuma Catholic can manage to get past American Leadership, or even American Leadership because it's so close to Castile, kind of a grudge match there on that side of the bracket, which would be really interesting. And then, like you said, the top half of that bracket, I mean, Sholo and Northwest Christian run real hot and cold. Fountain Hills has a couple of really good wins. Sabino, I think Alex Bell closed out the season with like an 8-touchdown game. Mm-hmm. I've seen Page in person. They're not going to be able to hang with Benjamin Franklin. But, you know, Benjamin Franklin's got it in their head that this is their year. And Push Ridge has taken on every single person that has come their way. I've had them number 1 since before the season even started. And sometimes it's harder to maintain momentum than it is to start a climb. And so I'm really, really looking forward to seeing what shakes out in this bracket.
Ralph, it's always so great chatting with you. We love your insight.
Thank you guys so much.
All right, take care, buddy. Good talking to you. All right, that was Ralph Amsden from Arizona Varsity. just the knowledge base that guy has is just
Everywhere.
Unbelievable.
Doesn't matter if you're in the southern part of the state or the northern part of the state, he
And
knows it.
I was sitting with him during the bracket reveals, and there were various media members who might have made predictions or, would look at the bracket and be so surprised. And more often than not, Ralph was like, yeah, I had Sunrise Mountain leapfrog and Saguaro. Yeah, I had that. Like, not in a showboaty way, just he knows his stuff. He knows his stuff. So really good stuff. Special thanks to all the coaches that came on with us. I know that it is a very busy week for them as they gear up for the opening round. And then for Ralph to sit with us for 15 minutes and kind of break things down in those top 4 brackets was really good stuff. So appreciate you guys tuning in to the Friday Night 360 AZ preview show. Make sure to use that Friday Night 360 AZ hashtag if you're out a game on Friday, and make sure to keep it here on Sports 360 AZ for all your high school football coverage.